Hurrah for the red and blue.
Real pleasure for me to be here today. I don't want to deliver a long set of remarks because I know you're all having so much fun. And I also know that Olivia is the perfect person to be here to talk with you about aging, which, out there in the world, it tends to be a somewhat gloomy subject. And I wanted to connect with this august group by telling you about something that's in my undergraduate speech for tomorrow morning. I've got a line in there about, I don't know if you think you know what you'll be doing when you're my age. And so the joke line, since I love classic rock, is, I hope you're not saying, hope I die before I get old. Who's old enough to remember Pete Townsend, 1965? That's The Who, right? So we probably have graduates from the class of 1966 in the room. Yes? Yeah, so I was outside finding it very difficult to come here because there was a parade of classes. And the first class I saw was the class of 1981. Now, I'm not a Penn alum, but that's my graduation year. And by God, those people look young and happy to me. And now I come here and I see all of you, and I just think it's a profound irony that Pete Townsend, who's still alive and kicking, wrote "Hope I Die Before I Get Old" in 1965, and I bet he disagrees now with that sentiment. Because the lives that we're all leading, that you're leading, are just extraordinary, right? I mean, we used to talk about first act, second act, third act, fourth act. There are so many acts now in life, and we're so glad that one of those acts has to do with your connection to Penn and to Wharton. The network is what the school is about. It's everything that you all do makes Wharton what it is. And so the longer we can celebrate that together, the better it is for everybody, which is why I hope I don't die before I get old. And I want to let you enjoy your lunches now. So thank you so much for being here.
It's great to see you all. Welcome back to Wharton. I've been at Wharton 23 years, so it seems like only yesterday when I arrived. But it's been a wonderful ride, and I'm so pleased that you're back here to share your knowledge and share your enthusiasm about this school. I was also on the Dean Search Committee, so I take all credit for our wonderful Dean Garrett, and we're just really thrilled with what he's been doing for us here. So on your chairs, I put a couple of propaganda items. I run a group here at the Wharton School called the Pension Research Council. And we work on everything pertinent to retirement security in the U.S., abroad, especially pensions, Social Security, healthcare. All of those topics are things that are very much on our minds and on the minds of whichever candidate should win the election in the U.S. forthwith. So with that, what I'd like to do is spend a couple minutes talking about some of my research and what we see coming down the pike in terms of global aging challenges and opportunities. So this in the upper right-hand corner is Franco Modigliani. Franco won the Nobel Prize for a very simple idea, and some of you may be familiar with him. The very simple idea, often the simplest ideas are the most impressive. So what he said is that the idea of life cycle saving and consumption behavior requires you at some point to think about when you're going to enter the labor market. Now I call that B as in birth. Of course, you don't enter the labor market, most of us, when we're born, but that's when you're born as a worker, let's say. And let's say you have some sort of earnings profile you hope that rises over time. At some point, the traditional notion was you retire, capital R. Ideally, what you're going to do is spend less than your income over your working years, save that up so that you'll have something to live on in retirement. This is a very simple notion, but it won him the Nobel Prize. And then from retirement until capital D, we all know what that is, right? That's your date of death. You're going to be doing your drawdown, and if you have bequest motives, you're going to worry about that. So the story is very simple. There's three things that we should worry about. Are people saving enough during the years that they're working? Are they investing their money so they're earning the right returns on their assets? And then when they hit retirement, are they doing the right thing, managing their money in retirement? But let's start with financial literacy. So we developed these, what we call the three big questions. And they seemed so simple that I just couldn't believe that anybody wouldn't be able to answer these questions. So here's the first one. It's called the interest rate question. Let's say you have $100 in a saving account that earns 2% interest a year. After 5 years, how much do you think you'd have? Now, to make it easy for you, I give you three answers. Less than $102, equal $102, or more than $102. Now, for those of you that haven't had too much wine, what's the right answer, class? More than 102. And DK means, I don't know. People refuse to answer. They just say, I don't know. So the right answer is more than 102. Congratulations. You all get A's. Next, inflation. Getting a little harder. So we say, imagine the interest rate on your savings account was 1% a year, and inflation was 2% a year. After 1 year, with the money in the account, would you be able to buy more than today, equal to today, or less than today? Less. Thank you very much. That's the correct answer. Now we're getting harder. The last question is about risk diversification. It's a harder question, but actually it's an easy question because the answer is either true or false. So you have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. True or false? Buying a single company stock usually provides a safer return than a stock mutual fund. False. All right, you guys really take the cake. Good job. So if you tallied up what fraction of people got all three questions right, excluding Wharton MBAs, right? Only a third got all three questions right, and less than half got the first two right. So what about will governments and employers provide? I know when I started teaching many years ago, there was this notion of a three-legged stool, saving for retirement. There was the government, there was pensions, and there was own saving, private saving. Well, the government plans are not doing well, as we know, right? The defined benefit plans in the private sector, by and large, are unwinding, and they're being replaced by 401k plans, which is all very well and good, except remember what I said about financial illiteracy. If you give people who are financially illiterate an opportunity to save, they might not do it. And if you tell them they have to invest, they're going to be too afraid. And so it's going to be very problematic. Finally, in the US, as well as around the world, public pensions, Social Security type pensions are very troubled. And so what are we going to do? Financial literacy, I think, is critical. We've got to begin in the home from a very young age, and we've got to start doing it more in the schools. Obviously, for those of you that are involved in pensions, plan design, I think auto-enrollment is a really good idea. It's helped across the country, and other countries are adopting this approach too. That is, everybody's going to be in the pension plan unless they opt out. Auto-enrollment is just the right way to do things. People go in and stay in. Some countries that I've worked in, Chile, Australia, Singapore, they have mandatory enrollment in pension plans. In Chile, it's 10% of your pay. Australia is going up to 12% of your pay. Singapore is more complicated. But you can't leave it to people to decide if they want to save. I think it's much better to put them in and then instruct them on how they should be managing their accounts. Working longer, however, is probably the most important message that we can share with people, especially young people. Just as our dean said, you don't go to education and build up your skills once. You have to keep investing in your skills. So when you get to be 75, 80, 85, 90, you have skills that are marketable. You have things that you can do. You're very productive. But the second, I've talked about saving, I've talked about it. The second, I'm going to talk about investment challenges. And the idea here, and this is what I worry about for my children, is that I think we're going to be living in a much lower expected return world for some time to come. I think we're not going to be earning what we were able to earn over the last 30 years on our investments. I think it's going to be much, much lower. And the impact of that will be we're going to have to save a lot more. We're going to have to make sure we don't pay too high fees and expenses. And we're going to have to protect our pennies against government intervention. So another factor that I'm very worried about is governments grabbing pension assets around the world. So it started to a large extent in Argentina when Mrs. Kirchner was the head of the country. And they had a very well-funded, successful private defined contribution system going for several years. And she said, well, we don't have any foreign exchange. She took $50 billion not privatized, socialized people's private pensions. So that was a shock, and there was actually very little outcry. And then Ireland did it, $200 billion. Hungary, Portugal, Poland, Bulgaria, Russia. Russia has not privatized or socialized the entire accounts, but they have taken the contributions for the last 2 years that people thought they were contributing to their private account and used it to fight the war in the Ukraine. Yeah. So, the concern is, could it happen somewhere else? Could it happen here? So let's talk about the decumulation phase. We've talked about saving. We've talked about investment. What about the payout phase? Here, I think we have a lot to learn. And in particular, I don't think we're doing enough to talk about longevity risk. That is the risk of outliving your assets. Now, time and time again, I'll call up for my students or what have you, a retirement calculator. So you can put in your age, you can put in your sex, sometimes you can put in more detail. And they say, boom, you're going to live to 87. That's it. They tell you your life expectancy. I say, well, life expectancy means that 50% of the people will outlive that age. So if I plan to draw down my assets to age 87, what happens the day I'm 88? Makes no sense. You cannot talk about lifetime retirement income and still focus on life expectancy. What are we going to do? I actually think that one of the things we need more of is what we call deferred or longevity annuities. So this would be a financial product which you buy, let's say, at 65, but it doesn't start paying you until you're 85. Or you pick the ages, right? The point is, if you buy it at 65 and you don't need the money for 20 years, then it's really cheap. And for a lot of people that are managing their 401k assets, this is exactly the kind of product that they need to be able to not outlive their money. Many countries actually now require annuitization. So Singapore says at age 55, you have to buy an annuity which will only kick in and start to pay you at age 85. Again, dirt cheap, but it's longevity protection. It makes an enormous amount of sense. So as Oscar Wilde said, it's better to have a permanent income than to be fascinating. And, especially at 85, 90, 95, and 100, I tend to agree. So I want to allow some time for some questions and comments. What do we need? I think financial literacy is absolutely critical. And so one of the things I gave you in the handout is some of our material on financial literacy. People need help saving and investing. Not everybody can get a Wharton MBA, right? So what do we do with the rest of the population? We need incentives to work longer. We have to quit telling people, hey, at 62 you can get your Social Security. It's just not going to work. It will not meet the needs for the future. We need insurance against outliving our assets. And when we really can't manage the money ourselves, we need to think of new products, new institutions that can help us do it for us early on. So these are some of our books on financial literacy. That's our website. I'd be delighted to take any comments or questions.